What if I told you that Eve's first struggle in the garden wasn't primarily about disobedience or being easily deceived? What if her real struggle, the one that might be keeping you up at night too, was about something far more familiar, the desperate need to control what feels uncontrollable? Hi, I'm Aggie, and I help Christian women break free from exhaustion and shame to experience the joy and peace Jesus actually promised us. Today, we're going to unpack Eve's actual struggle, her desperate desire for control in the face of uncertainty, and why that same pattern might be keeping you trapped in cycles of exhaustion and resentment right now. For generations, Eve's story has been simplified into a cautionary tale, the woman who couldn't resist temptation, the first to fall, the reason paradise was lost. But what if we've been missing the deeper, more human struggle happening in Genesis 3? Let's look again with fresh eyes. Notice that when the serpent approaches Eve, he doesn't lead with the fruit itself. He begins by questioning God's boundaries. Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? Eve corrects him, but then something fascinating happens. The serpent targets something specific. You will not certainly die, for God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. This wasn't just about forbidden fruit. This was about knowledge, control, certainty in an uncertain world. Eve wasn't simply being rebellious. She was reaching for what neurobiologists today call agency, the ability to predict and influence her environment, to manage outcomes, to protect herself through knowledge. When you stay up late organizing everyone's schedules, when you can't delegate without checking the work, when you monitor your husband's tone for signs of disapproval, you're reaching for the same thing Eve reached for, control as a pathway to safety. And where was Adam during Eve's internal struggle? The text tells us he was with her, present but silent, not speaking up, not engaging with the complexity of the moment. It's just like when your partner withdraws into his phone while you juggle 3 crises at once. It's just like when you try to discuss emotional needs and meet a wall of silence. Eve's story isn't primarily about disobedience. It's about a woman carrying the weight of a decision alone, reaching for control when faced with uncertainty, and filling a silence that never should have existed. Struggle shows up is in how we become the emotional managers of our relationships and households. You know you're carrying this load when you're the one who remembers everyone's appointments, notices when someone seems off, plans the holidays, maintains family connections, and anticipates needs before they're even expressed. Research from the American Psychological Association shows that women carry significantly more of this invisible emotional labor than men, regardless of whether they also work outside the home. I remember sitting in a therapy session as I listed everything I was keeping track of, not just tasks, but everyone's emotional states, potential conflicts, future needs. My therapist gently asked, "Who appointed you the manager of everyone's emotions?" I had no answer. Just like Eve, I had appointed myself. In Genesis, Eve takes it upon herself to manage access to knowledge, to determine what's best, carry the decision. She steps into a management role that wasn't actually assigned to her. This isn't about capabilities. Women are often excellent managers. It's about carrying burdens we were never designed to bear alone. The regulated nervous system can distinguish between appropriate responsibility and overfunctioning. It can say, this is mine to carry, and this is not mine to manage without guilt or fear. You know, as we discussed these deep patterns, many of you have shared with me that you want to take your healing journey more seriously. If therapy has been on your mind, I highly recommend checking out BetterHelp, the sponsor of today's video. What makes BetterHelp specifically valuable for our community is that they can connect you with therapists who not only share your Christian faith, but truly understand these specific patterns we're discussing. When you click on the link in my description, you'll automatically receive 10% off your first month, making it easier to take that important first step. Now, as we continue exploring Eve's struggle in our lives, this emotional management we just discussed doesn't happen in isolation. It's intimately connected to our second manifestation, which affects how we experience rest. way Eve's struggle manifests is in our profound reluctance to truly rest without feeling guilty or anxious. How many of you find yourselves making mental to-do lists during prayer time, or feeling that gnawing sense that you should be doing something even when you've carved out time to rest? That constant internal pressure that whispers, if you're not productive, you're not valuable. In Genesis, Eve wasn't content to simply be in the garden, receiving what was already abundantly provided. There was a fruit, this one thing, that represents more control, more knowledge, more doing. She couldn't rest in the provision, she had to reach for more. Before we continue, I want to introduce you to a framework that will help us understand these patterns. I call it the control surrender spectrum. On one end, we have unhealthy control, where we're micromanaging, hypervigilant, and exhausting ourselves trying to manage every outcome. This is where Eve found herself when reaching for the fruit, grasping for knowledge and certainty rather than using God's boundaries. On the opposite end is unhealthy surrender, where we completely withdraw, become passive, or numb ourselves to avoid engagement. This is where Adam positioned himself, physically present but emotionally and verbally absent during a crucial moment. In the middle is where God designed us to live in healthy interdependence. This balanced center is where we exercise appropriate influence over what's actually ours to manage, while trusting God and others with what isn't ours to control. When we look at the inability to rest through this framework, we can see how it keeps us firmly anchored on the unhealthy control side. We're trying to manage outcomes through constant activity, just as Eve tried to manage her future through reaching for the fruit. Our bodies weren't designed for this constant state of vigilance and control, which is why so many of us experience physical symptoms of exhaustion alongside our spiritual fatigue. Now that we understand this framework, let's explore our third manifestation, which directly connects to how our bodies respond to this pattern of control. The third manifestation of Eve's struggle is something you might not even recognize as unhealthy because our culture often praises it. Hypervigilance is a protection strategy. This looks like constantly scanning your environment for threats, checking your husband's expression for signs of disapproval, monitoring your children for potential problems, analyzing every interaction at church for hidden judgment. Your body stays in a state of alert. Shoulders tight, jaw clenched, never fully at ease. After Eve ate the fruit, Genesis tells us the eyes of both of them were opened. This heightened awareness, this new vigilance wasn't freedom. It was the beginning of a burden. Suddenly, she was aware of her nakedness, her vulnerability, and she felt explosive and safe in a very garden that was created for her flourishing. On our control surrender spectrum, hypervigilance sits firmly in the unhealthy control zone. We believe that if we're alert enough, careful enough, and vigilant enough, we can prevent pain and ensure safety for ourselves and everyone we love. Yet Philippians chapter 4, verse 6 to 7 promises us something different. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Notice that God's presence will guard your heart and mind, not your hypervigilance, not your control strategies, God's peace. We've explored Eve's patterns, but there's another crucial piece of this ancient story we need to understand: Adam's role, or more specifically, his silence. Genesis chapter 3 verse 6 tells us something fascinating. She also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate it. That phrase, who was with her, carries profound significance. Adam wasn't off somewhere else in the garden. He was there, present physically but completely silent during the entire exchange with the serpent. No questions, no input, no engagement with the complexity of that moment. Sounds familiar? The husband scrolling through his phone while his wife juggles 3 screaming children. The partner who shrugs and says whatever you think when asked about important family decisions.
the emotional absence that leaves women feeling like they're parenting or managing their relationships alone. But here's the truth we need to understand. When Adam remained silent, Eve feels compelled to step into the void. His withdrawal actually triggers her control response, and her control attempts often drive his further withdrawal. On her control surrender spectrum, Adam's silence represents the unhealthy surrender side: disconnection, passivity, emotional absence. It's just as problematic as Eve's unhealthy control.
God designed men and women to operate in a balanced center, engaged but not controlling, present but not dominating, speaking truth while listening well. This is where the story of Christ transforms everything. Look at how Jesus engaged with women. He never withdrew into silence like Adam, nor did he control or dominate. Instead, he demonstrated a completely new way of being. With the woman at the well, he engaged her complex emotional history without shame. With Martha's anxious controlling, he gently redirected rather than criticizing. In every interaction, Jesus modeled what healthy presence looks like, neither controlling nor withdrawing. On our control surrender spectrum, Jesus always operated from the balanced center, exercising appropriate influence while trusting his Father with what wasn't his to control. He shows us what regulated presence looks like in human form. In 2 Corinthians 5:17, Paul tells us, if anyone is in Christ, the new creation has come. The old has gone, the new is here. This isn't just poetic language. It's a neurobiological reality. Through Christ, our nervous systems can literally be rewired from patterns of control and withdrawal to patterns of regulated presence. Speaking of transformation, I know many of you are wanting to take your healing journey to a deeper level. If therapy has been on your mind, I highly recommend checking out BetterHelp, the sponsor of today's video. What I appreciate about BetterHelp is that they can match you with therapists who understand both your Christian faith and these specific attachment patterns we've been discussing. When you use the link in my description, you'll automatically receive 10% off your first month, making it easier to take that important step toward healing. Thank you for watching. If this video helped unearth something you've been carrying, please hit like and subscribe and share this with a friend. Remember, healing happens in layers, not all at once. But what happens when you feel completely resigned in your Christian walk? When you've put in your best efforts, but people keep failing you and your healing journey feels like it's crashed back to square one? How do you move forward? Check out this next video, because if you combine everything we've covered today, it'll give you deeper insights that will truly help you get back on track. Until next time, see you in the next video.